Welcome to season 2 of Practice What You Teach. I'm so excited to have Ashley joining us today to get into this new season and talk about some new tools and techniques and strategies. And this one is definitely a new one. We did not have anybody in season 1 talk about this thing, so I'm very excited to get into it. But before we do, Ashley, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm excited to be here too, Kimberly. It's taken us a long time to get this really scheduled and be able to meet, so I'm happy to be here. My name is Ashley Nordby, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have a private practice. I see quite a few clients in person now, and I still do have some virtual clients as well. I started my private practice in 2019, just about 6 months before the pandemic started. So I did a lot of virtual sessions during the pandemic, and I've transitioned back to in-person therapy as well. Let's see, I've been practicing since 2009. And I work primarily with adults. I work with a lot of adult women. Some of the areas of focus in my practice are childhood trauma, complex trauma, developmental trauma, all those words for trauma in childhood, and anxiety are my focus. Yeah. And relationships too. I like to work, I don't work with couples, but I work with individuals around their relationship patterns.
Yeah. It makes sense that some of that stuff might all kind of go hand in hand.
100%, yes.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you work with your clients on, some of the things that you teach them that help them with that stuff?
So I use I use mindfulness practices. I also teach my clients more body-based approaches like vagus nerve exercises, right? Which are used to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, right? That rest and digest. So a lot of my clients may be in a almost constant state of fight or flight, right? A majority of their time, they're in quite a bit of anxiety, and that is a more natural state for them. Like that's kind of just what feels normal. And so we work on using body-based strategies to calm down the nervous system, right? And start to bring down like the set point of being anxious at this level all the time is normal. That's like the set point. We work to kind of bring that down. So we've got a lower set point of activation in our nervous system. I also recommend my clients use bilateral music, which has to be used with headphones, right? And it sends a rhythm back and forth between each ear, which is very helpful in activating that parasympathetic nervous system again, right? And that also goes along with what we're going to be talking about today, which is brain spotting. I use a fair amount of brain spotting also with my clients. And I also use a fair amount of parts work or inner child work too.
Yeah. So for those of us who don't know about what brain spotting is, because it's one of those words that like it doesn't necessarily give it away in just the name, like
right.
What is brain spotting?
So brain spotting was developed in 2003 from a therapist. His name is David Grant, and he was an EMDR therapist. And he did like a slow flow EMDR. And so he would move his finger back and forth across the visual field with his clients while they process their trauma. And at one point, he was working with a client he'd been with for a long time, and he noticed that as he was going back and forth, her eyes sort of like wobbled, Like there was this just tiny little movement in her eye. And he said he felt like he had to keep his hand there, right? Mm-hmm. And so he stayed there, and her eye stayed on his finger, which was her spot. And as she stayed there, looking at that point, all of this additional processing happened for her. Mm-hmm. That had not happened before, even though she'd been using EMDR for about 2 years prior. Yeah. And so her thing was, she was an athlete, she was an ice skater, and she was trying to do a triple loop, and she had not been able to do it. And during that moment in time, when all of this extra processing happened and all this childhood trauma came up and was part of that session, after that session, she could do her triple loop.
Oh,
right. So it was like this remarkable moment, right, where this happened. And after that, David Green started experimenting a lot and started teaching his therapist friends, and then it kind of grew from there.
Yeah.
So that's been 20 years. And the premise of Brainspotting is that there's a couple things, right? One main premise is that where you look affects how you feel. Mm. So even as I'm sitting here, trying to share this with you, my eyes kind of go up sometimes, right? Because I'm kind of recalling the information that I want to share, right? Yeah. So my brain is accessing information when I'm looking up here, right? And all of us do this very naturally, very automatically. Yeah. So when we're working with clients and they're sharing about something that's upsetting or distressing to them, automatically their eyes are going to go to a certain direction and a certain spot in their visual field. And so as a brain spotting therapist, if I notice my clients looking in a certain spot, I might say to them, I notice that you're looking over there right now, right? Why don't you just allow your eyes to stay there and notice what it feels like in your body right now. Right? And then sometimes a client might notice they feel tension in their chest, right, as they're sharing about that thing. Or they might notice they're feeling tension in their stomach, or even feeling nauseous, right? And these are the the somatic experiences, right? Or the physiological feelings and sensations that happen in our body, that are connected with our emotions and connected with our traumas. Yeah.
So what does it look like I certainly can hear about how this can be really useful, like in the therapy space, especially in the work that you do working with people with all kinds of trauma and relationship things. What does it look like for you to use this yourself and practice this like in your own personal life?
Well, I was introduced to brain spotting when I started going to a therapist who did brain spotting, right? And I started in like summer 2020, right? Total shutdown during the pandemic. I was home with my 2 young kiddos at the time, trying to work from home. My husband was working from home. It was very stressful. And so I started seeing a therapist virtually, and she used a fair amount of brain spotting in her practice. And so I started doing it in therapy sessions with her. And I found it to be really, really powerful. And so a couple months after doing that in therapy myself, I decided to start training and took phase 1. So, in one way that I use it in my personal life is I seek out brain spotting therapists so that I can, right, receive brain spotting also. Also, one of our trainers puts together a monthly group where brain spotting therapists come together and we will use brain spotting on each other, right? So that we have our own time to just have our own processes.
Yeah.
But there are definitely versions of being able to use brain spotting at home by yourself too. Yeah.
What are some of the situations or maybe the kinds of feelings or experiences that you might use it by yourself at home?
So one recent way I've used it is so with brain spotting, right, there's lots of different versions or tools that we use, or they might call them different setups. So one of the ways that I like to use brain spotting is through double spotting, which is where I find the spot in my field of vision where I feel the most intense feelings, right? So I might feel the most tension in my body on that spot, or I might feel the most angry when I look at that spot, right? It's like an activation spot, is what they would call it. So I find that spot in my field of vision, and you can use just the wall and find a spot on the wall. We also use pointers. So we use these little pointers in brain spotting, right? So I've got these at my house, I've got them in my office. And so you extend them out, and then I would use this and I would find the spot in my field of vision using the pointer where I feel the most activated. And then I typically will find another spot in my field of vision where I feel the most relaxed or the most calm or resourced. So we often will call that a resource spot. And then I will go back and forth between my activation spot and my resource spot.
Okay.
And process in that way.
Yeah.
I know that probably sounds a little vague and strange.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
When you're doing this at home, when you're going back and forth between those spots, are you like thinking through the stressful thing? Are you kind of like replaying an experience? Or like, what does that like the thought
Feel like
process like? Because I imagine, I mean, maybe you're speaking out loud to yourself as you're doing this, but maybe I imagine it's probably more like an internal dialogue happening. But is it that you're analyzing the situation, or are you like replaying it kind of like a movie?
So I'm not analyzing the situation. It's not really about analyzing. It's more about mindful attention and observing your own process, right?
Okay.
So, for example, I was upset with my husband about something, right? For an example, that happens to us married folks, right?
For sure.
And so I will take myself in another room and I'm feeling angry, right? And I know why I'm feeling angry. And then I will find the spot in my field of vision where I feel the most intensely angry. So that intensity, it might be thoughts, right? It might be like internal griping or something like, oh, I can't believe he did that. And why did he think that was okay? And blah, blah, blah. Right. There might be that already happening in my brain. It's not like I'm trying to make it happen. Like it's just there. Right. Those thoughts. So it might be that those thoughts are very intense at that spot. It might be more physical. It might be more that I feel angry and it's more in my body.
Sure.
So maybe my muscles are tight, my chest is tense, my stomach is tight, right? It may be just more of a physiological experience of activation.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
It could be both, right? Or it could be that I just feel very, very angry when I look at this spot. It might not be that there's lots of thoughts going on, but I might just feel angry. And that's another activation, right?
Sure.
And that's the thing about brain spotting is it's not exactly the same every time, right? Sometimes it may be very mental. It may be that we've got all these thoughts that are just rushing through. It may be that it's all in our body, that we just notice like significant tension. Sometimes you can have significant tension in your neck muscles, and we're just focused on that. And so what we do with brain spotting is it's a lot of mindful attention and just noticing what's happening, right?
Sure.
So if I found my activation spot, and that spot is that I have tension in my neck, I'm just feeling that, then I really am just resting there. My eyes will be on my spot, and I'm just noticing the tension in my neck. Just paying mindful attention to that, noticing what that's like, and then allowing the process to take its own form.
Sure.
Okay. So when we connect the physiological sensations, those somatic symptoms, with our eye position, it's kind of like we're unlocking a little door, right? And we open the door and all the things come out of the closet, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that might be that we have memories come through. It might be no thoughts at all. It might just be a lot of different feelings in the body.
Yeah.
Right? It might be different feelings. And those can become very intense, right, during a session. But it's kind of experienced like riding a wave.
Sure. Sure.
Right? So your intensity goes up and you just observe that and notice it, and then it's going to go down again, and you observe and notice what that's like in your body, and then it will probably go up again, right? And so we're kind of more like bringing ourselves into a process and then allowing the process to happen.
Sure.
And trusting that our body and brain are geared towards health and well-being, and that our brain does want to resolve these things that are troubling us, right? And we're kind of like unlocking that little door and just allowing the brain to do what it does.
Yeah. I mean, the mind and the body are in constant communication, constant.
Right.
And so it seems like this is a way of really helping them to like get even more on the same page and work a little bit more collaboratively on healing rather than just leaning into putting our energy in one or the other. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know we talked about maybe doing a little demonstration, and so we can try it out for those of you curious about what this might look like. If you've never done this before, definitely recommend finding a therapist who can kind of guide you through this to learn more about it. But just wanted to give you like a little quick sip, a little sample of like what that might look like, and maybe kind of actually how you like if you were doing this at home, kind of like what that might look like, what you might be doing. So I'll let you kind of take the lead on this.
Okay. Yeah. And I do want to put kind of a plug in for on YouTube, there are videos of therapists who are doing self-spotting, brain spotting, right? And what they're doing is that they will talk you through and guide you to do self-spotting on your own.
Okay.
Okay, so that's out there, and I can maybe send you some to link in this video.
Yep, they'll be in the bio below.
And typically the self-spotting videos are very focused on finding what we would call a resource spot. Okay, because we're not encouraging anyone to go into a deep activation or a deep process on their own at home.
Sure.
Right? Like it's always recommended that you do that with a therapist and have support of a therapist. So there are videos out there, and they are primarily resource spotting, which is great. It's a fantastic tool.
Yeah.
But I did want to kind of see if you would like to do a little demonstration, Kimberly, if you're open to sharing just a little bit about maybe something that's been bothering you recently. Nothing too serious, right? But life
Yeah.
brings us lots to work with.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking about, and I imagine this is something a lot of people can relate to in this time of year. We are getting into
Mm-hmm.
holiday season. And so being able to like trying to coordinate holiday plans with family and friends and
Mm-hmm.
meals and gifts and all of the time commitments. And
Yes.
it's a lot of things. It's a
Yeah.
lot of balancing a lot of people's wishes in a
Yes.
limited schedule. So that's kind of what's, I guess, coming to my mind right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is. So I noticed a couple of times that your eyes went in a certain direction, kind of upwards into, yep, that direction. Is that your right or left? I'm not sure.
My right.
Okay. So I want you to just let your eyes go back up to that direction, right? Just naturally. And just for a moment, thinking about what you're sharing with me, about all the different things there are to juggle. The calendars and the gifts and the meals. Yeah. I'm just curious about, what does it feel like when you're looking over there in your body right now?
I mean, I'm definitely um, noticing that the longer I'm looking at this spot, the more I'm feeling like my back just kind of like, it's fine. It'll be fine. um, um, yeah.
What does it feel like in your back when
Um,
it's saying it's fine?
a little bit of like a melting. Because when I was originally talking about the
Hmm.
problem, I could feel kind of this like tightening of like, oh my gosh, there's so much to manage.
Mm-hmm.
But as I'm looking at this spot, I can like literally feel like each part of my back kind of like just kind of like relaxing. And
Awesome.
yeah, yeah, it's interesting to kind of to
Mm-hmm.
to kind of just yeah feel the physical part of that because then
Mm-hmm.
in connection with that, I can feel my mind also being like, it's fine. We we do this every year, and we have done this every year. We've not only survived it every year, but we've come out on the other end enjoying the time that we've had with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
so it's also, yeah, like I can feel like my back kind of getting a little bit more at ease and my brain kind of feeling a little bit more at
Settling.
ease.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I want to invite you to just like continue noticing that, right? Just
Mhm.
spend another minute just noticing what that feels like in your back and what your brain is saying. And so we would call this more of a resourced spot. Right?
Mhm.
Feels feels better there, right? It's like, oh,
Yeah,
actually, we're okay. And you could even identify that somatic experience, right, of your back
yeah,
melting, grounding. Yeah.
yeah.
But conversely, right, as you were sharing initially, you said you noticed the feeling in your body more,
Yeah,
right, of tightening up.
yeah.
Yeah. I really should have asked you about that first, and then we could have tapped into that. But, um, where do you feel that? Where did you feel that in your body, that tightening up?
I mean, kind of the
Mm-hmm.
reverse of what I felt when I looked at that spot. Like I could feel in my back, like the different like layers, kind of like
Oh,
oop, tight, 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 to like working its way up
ratcheting up.
from like the mid back all the way up into my shoulders. Like, oh, there's just so much. As I looked at that spot, it
Mm-hmm.
was like each of those layers kind of were like, it's fine. It's fine.
It's okay.
If, if
Mm-hmm.
I have a planning brain, and my brain thrives on organizing things. And you know me, know I love my spreadsheets. And so,
Uh-huh.
um,
That's awesome.
yeah, but just kind of the,
Yeah.
yeah, it was almost the like you kind of described kind of that wave. It was that kind of like that buildup of tension and then that like releasing of
Mhm.
tension.
Mhm.
So that was, yeah, it was really cool just to feel that. And again, like we've got links to some you had said those self-spotting, like the resource spotting
Mhm.
videos. We'll have some links
Yep.
in the description below so you guys can find it if you kind of want to try something like that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ashley, if people want to learn more about this, or maybe they want to give it a try if they're in the Charlotte area, how can they find you?
Mhm. So I am found on Psychology Today. Ashley Nordby is my name. And if you also go on Psychology Today, you can pick out what types of therapy you're looking for, and brain spotting is an option. So if you hit brain spotting as part of your search filter, right, you can find a lot of different brain spotting therapists in our area or the state of North Carolina, right? If you'd like in person or virtual, there's lots of great professionals out there. I also have a website. My website is called thehealingplacenc.com. So you can find more information about me there. There's also an organization called Southeast Brainspotting Institute, or SEBI for short. And you can find lots of different brain spotting therapists on there also that are in the whole region of the Southeast. So yeah, and there's tons of information on the internet, on YouTube also, for learning more about brain spotting itself.
Yep.
Um, there are lots of different interviews with the founder of Brain Spotting, and there's a website, brainspotting.com, where you can find more information about trainings if you have any interest as a practitioner.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We'll put links to all of those things that you just described below.
Yes.
Psychology
Mm-hmm.
Today, your website, the Sevi place, I think is what you said it was called.
Debbie. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. We'll have all those links below so you guys can find them. Yeah, this was really cool. And like I said, I am a big fan of things that like really engage the mind and the body. So it sounds like here's yet
Mm-hmm.
another tool that people can have in their toolbox to really like connect those two things and have them work a little bit more in harmony for healing. So, okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you
Having
for
me.
coming on. And thank you for demonstrating so people could get a little sample of what this is.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It was great seeing you.
Good to see you. And thank you guys for tuning in. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button below so that way you're notified when new episodes are coming out. And we'll see you next month.